Okay, so my name's Jay and I head up the Bournemouth Bus Rally team here today. This is our 5th year of operation since 2017. It's the first time we've actually held an event since 2019 due to the pandemic and all of the restrictions around that. So we're really pleased to be here today. We're celebrating 120 years of Bournemouth transport, which is a massive achievement. Really, it's all about celebrating today's event. We've got over 40 entrants here, lots of free services. We've got over 1,000 people arrived on the site. So we're really, really pleased with today.
Hello, welcome aboard. I'm Jonathan Radley and I own Ruby. And this is the gear selector. And we've got a nice big steering wheel. And this is the handbrake. And this is how you indicate to turn left or to turn right. And a speedometer, which shows up to 80 miles an hour, and they would do 80 miles an hour back in the day, but I don't take it past 60 miles an hour anymore. And this dial shows how much air I have in the tanks for the brakes and the gear change. And there are lots of switches here for lights and heaters and wipers and vents, windscreen washers and all that sort of thing. I've owned it for 10 years, I've done a lot of work restoring it. We rebuilt the engine in 2019, and I call her Ruby because she's red. I'm wearing the red and white bus and coach driver's uniform from the 1950s and the 1960s. In 1969, red and white, like many bus companies, was taken over by the state-owned National Bus Company. And during the early 1970s, the National Bus Company introduced a new uniform like this one for all their driving staff across England and Wales. This actual uniform was worn by a red and white coach driver during the 1970s when he drove his coach in and out of Cheltenham coach station. This coach was new in 1968 to a company called Red and White, who had depots throughout South Wales. The chassis was built by a company called Bristol Commercial Vehicles, who were based in the city of Bristol. The model was termed an RE, which was their first rear engine bus and coach chassis. It was quite novel in the early 1960s when it was new. It was the first rear engine chassis that Bristol Commercial Vehicles made, and it was probably the most successful first generation rear engine bus and coach chassis built in Britain. The bodywork was built by a company called Eastern Coachworks, who were based in Lowestoft. The body is mainly aluminium framed and aluminium panelled, but has quite a lot of fiberglass panelling and also quite a lot of hardwood, both in the body and in things like the seats and the floor. The vehicle is powered by a Leyland 600 6-cylinder diesel engine, which has an output of about 150 brake horsepower at 2,200 revs. And in its day, these coaches were known as absolute flyers by the drivers, who pretty much loved them because they were very good at both acceleration and high speed. I met a coach driver of these vehicles about 5 years ago, who was well in his 80s by now, but he told me that he actually got stopped on the M4 in the early 1970s doing over 90 miles per hour in one of these coaches, because of course in those days diesel vehicles weren't governed to a maximum speed, so they would literally go as fast as they could physically go, which is quite remarkable because I don't drive anything over 60 miles per hour these days, but it's interesting to know that back in the day they would actually achieve that sort of speed. The coach has got 47 high back seats. They were originally trimmed in burgundy leather, but when I did the restoration back in 2013, there simply wasn't the funds to have all the seats recovered in leather, so I had them retrimmed in a sort of period design of moquette. The services this sort of coach would run would really take all day to travel anywhere back in the 60s, because we had very few motorways in those days. So a journey from Cardiff to London used to take over 7 hours, and you would go through Newport, over the brand new Severn Bridge, and you would go through Marlborough, Hungerford, Newbury, Reading, Maidenhead and Slough before you joined a bit of the M4 past London Heathrow Airport, over Chiswick flyover, and then into London Victoria Coach Station. Other routes this sort of coach would have done back in the day would have been from Cardiff to Blackpool, holiday destinations along the south coast, so like here in Bournemouth, Ilfracombe in Devon, Paignton, Eastbourne, Brighton, all those sorts of places were destinations that coaches like this travel to on a daily basis. People often ask me how many miles this coach would have done in the 15 years it's in service. The recollection is it's done somewhere in the region of 1.8 to 2 million miles. I know that on the basis that Red and White used to take the engines out to have them reconditioned every 280,000 miles, and I've got the full service record, and in the 15 years it had 6 engines, so it's done a lot of miles, but happily does a lot more still. Other features of the vehicle: it has a semi-automatic gearbox, which is very easy to use. You just click a little lever in the cab into the next gear, and the gearbox automatically takes up that gear, so there's no double declutching, which makes it much easier than previous models. The steering has no power assistance though. You've got a very big steering wheel, which when you're turning the vehicle in a tight space you have to really pull the steering wheel round on. And the handbrake is not air assisted, you just pull a handle up and metal rods go along the chassis and apply the brakes on the rear wheels only. But apart from that, it's very nice to drive and very easy to drive. Another interesting feature of this is, whilst the engine is down at the back, the radiator is at the front here, but there is no fan on it. It literally works on the flow of the air going through the radiator and dropping down under vents underneath the front there. When I first bought it, I was expecting it to overheat in hot weather, but in 10 years it never has, so I assume that it works very well without a fan.
Plug your ears. No, ears.
Hello, my name's Ian Purdy. I live in Bournemouth. This is my Bedford TK fire engine. I've owned it about 16 years now. It's ex-Dorset Fire Brigade and it's served it new to Redhill Park. I've collected models for years, model fire engines, and out of the blue I had a insurance policy mature. So this is what I bought. And this fire engine, as I say, when it was with Dorset Fire Brigade, it was sold to Kimmeridge Fire Brigade. They're a volunteer brigade in Dorset, and it's a very small village, Kimmeridge, small lanes, and they found that this fire engine was too big for the narrow lanes. So they decided they would buy a Land Rover fire engine to replace this. So I heard on the grapevine about this for sale and I bought it, and it's a nice hobby that I enjoy going to different shows with it.